This Leading Differently mini-series is kindly sponsored by Pact Solutions. University leaders know that complexity slows progress. Pact helps universities deliver digital transformation that endures and improves the day-to-day experience for students and staff. The team focuses on the student journey and the core systems that matter to simplify processes, standardise integrations, and unlock trusted data for reporting and decision-making. Their approach is adopt, not adapt, change with people, not to them, and governance that moves at the right pace without unnecessary bureaucracy. From strategy to hands-on delivery, they reduce risk, accelerate outcomes, and build lasting capability inside the institution. Pact has supported many universities, including Birmingham City University, Buckinghamshire New University, University of London, Southampton Solent University, and the Royal College of Art. Learn more at pact-solutions.co.uk and connect with the team to explore how Pact can help your next transformation be a success. I am Susanna Marsden, a higher education consultant who helps to develop and support HE institutions in the UK and beyond. This podcast takes a deep dive into the roles of people who work in this hugely varied higher education sector. Each episode reveals what's involved in a specific role, the career path that led to it, and tips on how to get in and get on in these jobs. My guest in this episode is Professor Damien Page, Vice-Chancellor at Buckinghamshire New University. Damien's progressed significant change at the university in his first few months in role, and he talks in this episode about how things are being done differently at BNU to make a greater impact for students and staff and to increase organisational efficiency. He reflects upon why operational understanding for a leader is just as important as strategic direction, and he also takes a reality check on the purpose of strategic plans. We also hear more about the working class leaders in higher education sector network he set up in 2023 and the motivation behind it. Damien, welcome to the podcast and thanks for being my guest in this episode. Let's start with a bit about your background. The career paths of many UK Vice-Chancellors have started with academic roles. Your career path is different. You started in recruitment, moved into further education, and then into higher education through a series of increasingly senior roles to the post you have today as VC. Can you share some more about your career background and also what drew you into higher education?
Yes, certainly. So I was first in family to go to university, and I chose English literature because it's the only thing I liked. I mean, I went to university because I didn't want to go into work. I thought I'd have another few years just reading books. I thought that sounded great. And of course, back in the days, no fees, no student loans, got a good maintenance grant. So it was good. Only thing was, I was a commuter student before the term was even existed, so I had to work part-time all the way through, still despite the maintenance grant, just to support myself. Left there and had no idea what to do. I had no career path. I hadn't engaged with the university properly in terms of careers, none of that. Before recruitment, I went into advertising. So I worked in advertising. Not the glamorous side of advertising, the kind of grottier side of advertising. So I did that for a while, did some sales jobs, recruitment, again, not my bag. But I got a good bonus, and as soon as I got the bonus, I jacked the job in and went to Southeast Asia for 5 months. And it was over there, I thought, when I kept thinking about, I've got to come back, I can't go back to recruitment or sales, just can't do it. And I've told the story many times, I've probably embellished it over the years, Susanna, so I apologise. It was in Thailand. So I was on Koh Phangan full moon party. That bit was, I remember distinctly, that it gets a bit fuzzy after that. And there was just like a revelation, I'm going to go into teaching, and I thought probably secondary, I couldn't handle primary, and my hat off to primary teachers because I couldn't do it. So I thought secondary, came back, saw an advert for post-compulsory sector, and it said, come do your teacher training, work in, teaching prisons, colleges, adult education, and I thought that was great. And from that moment on, I was just completely obsessed with education. The first time I found meaning in work, the first time, it was probably approaching workaholism, to be honest, because I loved it so much. Worked long hours, but it was just the best work I'd ever done. So I worked in Lewisham College for 6 years, tough inner city college, but outstanding in Ofsted terms, outstanding, one of the best in the country. And it was there, we really saw what education transformation looks like. I mean, every university now says we transform lives, and the fact is most don't. If you've got 3 or 4 A's, you go in there, your parents are well networked. It's not educational transformation. The work we do in universities like us, where it's largely first in family, students from areas of social deprivation, that's educational transformation. So it started in FE and it's just never left me. The only real difference is scale. So instead of working with a group of 30 students in a classroom and that kind of almost the vitality of that interaction and learning, it's just now you're responsible for transformation for thousands. So it's never changed, and it still gets me out of bed. I still look forward to coming to work on a Monday. Sunday night, I did none of the Sunday dreads or anything that I used to get. It's the most incredible job.
And you've worked in 5 of the UK's universities, and soon on in your career, when you moved into HE, you were moving into leadership positions like head of department, dean of school, deputy VC, and then on to Vice-Chancellor. What would you say were the main leadership lessons that you learned along that path? And is there anything that you do now differently?
I'll probably do a lot differently. I think each of them were a learning experience. I've never done any formalised leadership training. I did try some. I didn't like it. I didn't get anything out of it. The approach I've always taken, still take. If I'm curious, that's the main thing. Leadership is you need to be endlessly curious about everything. So if I need to find out something, I'll go and find out about it. It's that kind of like itinerant learning almost, So it's being responsive to the need that you're faced with. So the best advice I ever got when I went into education, into leadership, someone said, don't go for the comfy chair. And I never have. It's always better to learn in places and in environments that are challenging. When I was head of department, no one else wanted the job because, there were some characters in there, outcomes weren't good financially, it wasn't even washing its face. So that was an incredible learning experience. I think the learning curve was steepest from head of department through to dean of faculty. That was the steepest. Dean in particular was probably where I learned the most. I've learned as much from working for bad leaders as I have from good leaders. Bad leadership's an incredible treasure trove of learning. It really is. Because you think, I'm never going to do that. You see how things play out. You're part of it. You're adjacent to bad leadership. Incredible learning experience. What I do differently, I was just too impetuous. I didn't think things through properly. Didn't probably consult enough. So I've learned, and some of my current colleagues will probably dispute this, but I think I've learned to slow down a bit, and adjust the pace to things. We still work quick. It's certainly in comparison to most of the sector, we work very quickly. But I have slowed down. I think the most important thing is understanding the impacts of every decision that you're going to make. So I do these back to the floor meetings. I've done about coming off the 30 of them now at B&U, where I'll go and work with and sit with colleagues for a couple of hours who are, the cold face of things, mainly in professional services, because I understand that bit less. And that's where you see the impact of every decision that's been made. If we have a really good understanding of what the final impact of our decisions are, it makes us rethink things and it brings a greater clarity to our decision making. So learn a lot, but I'm getting older as well. You can't keep the pace going, and the more experience you get, the more you've seen things and you've seen what works and what doesn't work.
You became Vice-Chancellor of Buckinghamshire New University in February 2025, and that followed nearly 2 years as its sole Deputy Vice-Chancellor. So you had significant insight into the institution. What reflections do you have about that step between DVC and VC in terms of where you place your time and focus?
I don't think it's transformed dramatically. I mean, I've always been. I mean, there's the old cliche of DVC runs the university, VC runs around outside doing handshaking, and I'm not sure it's like that. I've never come across many VCs who do that. You have to have that internal focus. But I guess There's a greater level of stakeholder engagement at senior levels as VC. Other than that, I still like to stay operational. I do a lot of training for emerging leaders. And the amount of times I've heard people say, I've been advised to stop being operational. You just got to be strategic. If you want to get into the exec, just be strategic. Worst advice ever. Just the absolute worst advice ever. You have to do both, and you should always do both. You have to think strategically, but learn operationally. You have to be willing to make strategic decisions and do stakeholder engagement, whatever you have to do, finances, but then get out with a team and be able to understand their world, and start co-creating solutions to problems that they're facing. And then you bring that learning back to the strategic level. I don't think it was that much different between DVC and VC. It was a worse experience because I was an internal candidate. It was the first time really of being an internal candidate, and I wouldn't want to do that again. Every day you got people say, "Oh, are you ready? Have you been shortlisted? Have you heard anything yet?" And it's that continue. You're just trying to do the DVC job, but you've got that constant reminder. And there's always people who want you to get the job internally, and there are others who really don't want you to get it because of what it would mean for them, I think.
BNU's strategy is called Strive, and it has goals for what you'd like to achieve for students, financial surplus, impactful research, staff advocacy, student number growth, and in its role as a civic university. I'm interested to know more about the student profile of the university and the specific strategic aim you have to be best in the sector for student satisfaction. What steps are you taking to reach that goal in a way that aligns with your student profile and needs?
So the strategy runs till 2028, but we're actually going to have a new one in March next year. It's time. The BNU of today is not the BNU of even a year ago, frankly. We've changed dramatically, partly because we've had to, partly because we wanted to, partly because we needed to. So we're kind of drawn a line under that strategy. It was, I guess I wasn't here when it was done. It's too generic. I mean, I'm very critical of most university strategies because the idea of, and it's almost like, cutouts now or pro forma. Name me the university 2035. Let's say 10 years. It's ridiculous. No one knows what's going to happen in 10 years. You just don't. Look at the way the sector's changed over the last 2 years. And I understand why why universities do it, for the same reason private sector do it. And it's just as ridiculous there because the environment is not stable enough to be able to do that. So the whole purpose of our new strategy is to position ourselves for whatever happens, to make sure that we are agile enough, that we can change enough, that we're putting our focus and our resources in the right place so that whatever we might have a very different government in 5 years' time. So we're going to be ready for that. We can't just keep doing what the sector has always done. So I think the students are definitely at the heart of that. And again, all universities say that. But when you look at the way money is spent in universities, for example, you start to see that students aren't at the centre of everything. There is money used incredibly badly in the sector. And there are things at BNU that I certainly wouldn't have spent money on because there is no benefit for students, research, or our people. And they're the only three things we're interested in. Our whole strategy will be built around those three things. So our students, again, it's kind of a strange profile. So we're technically a community-based university. We're a local university, so we recruit a lot of students locally. They're mainly mature, a lot of career changes, first in family. We've got increasing numbers of international students, however. So whereas some universities are struggling, we started with a pretty small base, but we've increased dramatically, by 400 or 500% over the last couple of years. So now we've got a very different student mix. So now again, it's part of that being prepared. How are we meeting the needs of international students? We've got a greater understanding. So we think about our students in we've got 8 personas. Where we look at demographics, subject area, background, ambitions, career trajectory, all of those kind of things. So everything we do now is positioned against them. If it's to do with finance or digital, like whatever it happens to be, we're thinking, well, how will this work for each of these personas? How do we need to personalise what we do across all of our services, including our teaching and learning and our leadership, to make sure we're meeting these very different needs for very different students? So it's tough. If we had all of our students were 19-year-old white kids from the suburbs, fantastic. It's easy. We don't have it that easy. It's a good challenge to have because that's the type of university. It's part of our values. These are the type of work we want to do with the type of students we want to work with. So we have to think about it in a different way. We can't take the generic HE approach, not the approach that's been going on since the Middle Ages.
And I guess part of that must be about their sense of belonging at the university as well.
Yeah. The most often used word, we're doing the new strategy now, so we're doing a lot of stakeholder meetings with students. That sense of belonging, I think belonging doesn't even sum it up. A lot of our students consider it home. It feels like there is a homeliness to it. All of our students talk about that it's a really caring environment. People here will go above and beyond. And I've seen that doing these back to the floor meetings. It's the little things sometimes where people will step outside of their job descriptions because of the needs of the students. I don't mean working, silly hours or anything like that, but just in the moment, they will adapt their practice because of the student in front of them. And that's a really good place to be. So we've definitely drawn a line under the past, and it's an exciting place to be now.
And how much of your own experience as a student would you say informs the approach that you think is important at BNU?
Oh, very little. Very little. It's so long ago. I'm 51 now. It's the environment was so totally different. My degree, God, I nearly got thrown out 3-4 times for poor attendance, not for any good reason. And it was just a different environment. It was all large lectures. No one really worried about employability. I don't think I ever heard that term until I started working in FE, because it was about the love of the subject. And if you don't get a £30,000 loan, you can do that. You can do something for the love of a subject or the love of learning, for the discipline. That's largely disappearing now. Large swathes of the country, particularly the country at the moment, where universities are having to cut provision. Working class young people now don't have access. There are cold spots around the humanities or the arts, languages. So, yeah, it's a completely different environment. I think we should never base what we do now on our own personal experience.
And what opportunities do you have to spend time with students? And is that important to you?
Yeah, so there's the formal way. So through committees, all of our committees have student representation. We have student governors. We spend a lot of time with them to prepare them for it so they can take part. We had a council meeting last night, and our new student governors are fantastic. They're very vocal. We've supported them because it's an intimidating environment. You've got 25 people, members of the executive, independent members who are all successful in their own right. It's very formalised. There's hundreds of pages to read through. But our student governors are good. They're vocal. They will hold us to account. If we're doing something that is not impacting them positively, they'll let us know. So there's the formal mechanisms. But then an hour a week, I walk around campus and just talk to random students, which some of them find a bit weird. They don't know what Vice-Chancellor is, a lot of them. And why would they? Why would they? It's not an essential thing. But it's just asking. It's not a formulaic thing. It's just saying, well, what's your experience like? What was your day like today from the moment you got on campus? What was the experience with our reception or the refectory? What was the teaching session like? Just to hear, just to maintain that very informal connection with students, because I don't teach anymore. I would have so little time to prepare. I'll be doing them a disservice. In fact, my student satisfaction would be terrible, I think, if I was teaching. So I'm probably better off out of the classroom.
Since you became Vice-Chancellor in February 2025, a lot has happened. You've formed a new leadership team, you've restructured 9 schools into 3 colleges, you're terminating 50% of the university's collaborative provision, and there's been work in the university on the governance and policy framework to reduce bureaucracy and to speed up decision making. And I'm interested to explore that latter point about reducing bureaucracy, because there is a lot of talk in the sector, isn't there, about the amount of time spent in meetings, the volume of paperwork. You just mentioned paperwork there to do with your governors meeting, and the challenge of getting things agreed, such as new programmes. How have you gone about looking at this bureaucracy reduction in the university, and how do you get creative thinking into revising frameworks and processes?
I think with any problem, you just get the right people in the room and you co-create a solution. You don't need committees. We've deleted about 50% of our committees. Friday is a meeting-free day across the university. We still have to have conversations sometimes, but people need that space to think. They need that space to catch up a lot. If you have a spare hour in HE, you can get a lot done. We've also stipulated meetings should not go more than an hour, 45 minutes ideally. So we've cut down a lot of meetings, and it's taken a while to roll through, but we're modelling that from the top. Then we're looking at processes. Now, approvals process is probably one of the most fraught, complicated, and elongated processes in universities. And there's the cliche that it's 18 months. You need 18 months. You don't need 18 months. We've done it in 3 months and recruited well on really high quality courses. So we just sat down and we mapped it out. We've got the right people in the room, professional services, academics, leadership, students, and we said, well, look, this is the process now, and you go through each of the steps. And we literally look at it saying, why are we doing that? Because we're doing it 3 steps later. So why do it there? Just do it 3 steps later. And you can easily cut down repetition. If you look at the process with the right people, you can easily see where you can cut it down. So we've massively reduced that, and we're going to reduce it again. We never get things perfect the first time. There are always improvements to be made. And that's what I mean, going back to the operational. Now, that's not a strategic matter, but the strategic difference it has to a university is incredible. So you have to be involved and interested and curious about some of those processes.
And I guess for something like new programs, you can do it quickly if the program's written well and it's all in shape. There's no reason, is there, for the long length of time that leads up to it?
No, and things are changing. So I remember the old days when I was an academic, and you do a new course. It was so lengthy, and you had to detail everything in it. But take something like AI. If you're writing a course that you're expecting to last for 5 years, it won't last 5 years. Particularly, it takes engineering. As technological advances move on the sector that we're working in, that students are aiming for, you have to minimise the content so that it can be flexible, it can be adapted. Learning outcomes are sacrosanct, but again, if they're written in the right way, it becomes far easier. So it's just taking a really critical lens to everything we take for granted, I think.
You mentioned technology there, and obviously it can play a central role in efficiency and effectiveness. And I know digital is one of the pillars of your strategy at the moment. And a particular project you're progressing is a full reassessment of the student record system, which obviously holds the foundation of so much that a university does behind the scenes. Now, it might sound strange to some people that I'm talking with a Vice-Chancellor about a student record system, because surely that's way down their focus. But for you, it's not, is it?
It's a huge thing. It's one of the most fundamental things. It costs a lot. It's a major investment for a university, but it does make a difference. When you look across the sector, again, at complexity, we're all about simplifying things. So it's not just, we've prepared for 3 years and I know far too much about it. I shouldn't know too much about it. And then when I speak to my colleagues who really know about it, it blows my mind. But the fact is, if we simplify things before we actually install it, then it just gets better and better. If your data is still poor by the time you put in a new student record system, it'll make no impact. And then people will start doing workarounds, and then you can see how the complexity through systems goes on and keeps making things needlessly complex. So it's a big thing, but we're taking our time. There are universities out there who have spent 10 years doing this and it's still failed, and it's cost millions. You cannot rush something. This is something, again, where I go back to the thing about pace. I have to listen to the people I trust that this cannot be rushed. So we said, fine, we'll move forward at pace and other things, but let's get this right. So it's a matter of knowing how much detail I need to know. I understand what it does in broad terms, but I don't understand the complexities of how we get it installed and how we get to that point. But I trust the experts we have.
We've talked about a number of initiatives that you've been progressing since becoming VC, and another of those initiatives is you've created an equity board to embed equity into culture and decision-making processes. You've also got the Being You network that's designed to amplify voices and intersectional experiences from those colleagues who are underrepresented in higher education. Can you share some more about that work?
Yeah, in fact, our equity board met for the first time this morning. It arose, I guess, out of frustration, the way that EDI or equity is done in the sector, from experience of myself and other senior colleagues. It's generally done through, there's a gloss to it. There are charter marks, there are certificates, there are badges, and universities like them because you can put it on the website and it's meant to change things. I've been in many institutions where there is no change whatsoever. It is just a badge that you put on there. And then it's done through committees that are very internalised, usually only internal members, very slow, produce a lovely set of minutes. But when it comes to actual hardcore action, there's very little of it. So we wanted to do it differently. So the equity board, we kept it pretty small. It's only 10 members, half internal, half external. And we did expressions of interest out through my LinkedIn. And we got some great people. People who really know how it can work and what the boundaries are and where we can push things. Because we're doing well. Our inclusive recruitment strategy has been incredibly successful. So we send out all interview questions 72 hours in advance. We offer alternatives to interview for neurodivergent candidates, mandatory diverse panels. And we can see the difference that's made, so particularly at senior levels. So we've got greater representation of disabled staff, global majority staff. We've seen the pay gaps come down as well since we started doing this. So we know that kind of thing works, but we don't want to pat ourselves on the back and say, oh, that's that fixed then. So the equity board is a means of challenging us from an external perspective. So we're very open about what we share with the members of that board, and they were great with their constructive criticism. And we need that. We don't want to get complacent. We want to continue doing this and doing this well. So we've got that kind of formalised thing. The BNU is great, and we've got affinity groups. They're not strategic in any sense, but it's a place of belonging, going back to what you said earlier, for staff. So it's working well all in all. It's like the kind of grand strategies, the very agile and responsive equity board, and then the more social affinity groups, I think, all of which are important.
And one of the things I noticed about your recruitment, certainly in a role you're advertising at the moment, the chief student experience person, your job descriptions are really succinct and clear and just plain English. Is that a purposeful thing that you've done to support your inclusive recruitment?
Yeah. So the senior posts we're doing now, we provide the bare bones, a brief description, and candidates write their own job description. So here's what we need to be done. How would you go about doing it? What would it look like? And it's fascinating. It beats an application form hands down. I would take this over any application form, and I've done hundreds of recruitment to different posts. You really get a sense of the candidates. The way they would approach things, their thinking, their personality, even. And what their values are. I think it just comes across much better. Then we do things like, on that post in particular, students will probably be doing most of the questioning of candidates. We'll work with them. They'll spend time with us as an exec, but we want our students to think, this is the person we need. This is the person who's going to make sure every interaction we have in this university is going to be excellent. And that's what we want to get to. That's the purpose of this post. So with all of our posts, we go back to purpose. And it came from a conversation with me and our chief people officer and directors of transformation. So when was the last time someone asked you what the purpose of your job is? Not your job description, not, you do this many hours, you're responsible for this, but what's the purpose of this role? And so that's what we've paired everything back to. If you understand the purpose of a role and really understand it, job descriptions write themselves, or should.
Outside of BNU, you set up the Working Class Leaders in Higher Education network in 2023 to support working class origin colleagues into leadership positions. What data does the sector have about working class professionals, and what observations do you have about the impact of class on career progression?
I haven't been able to find any data on it, not sectoral data of any, there are small scale studies, but nothing, because it's not a protected characteristic. So if it's not a protected characteristic, universities think, well, why bother reporting it then? We're moving towards that now, where we'll start treating social class as a protected characteristic. It wasn't an informed decision to start this, to be honest. It was literally, I went out with some senior colleagues at another university, four of us, all PVCs and DVCs. And we just started, as you do, talking about our backgrounds. And it just occurred to us that we were all from a working class background. And I couldn't remember another HE event I'd ever been to where everyone there was from a working class background. So because I'm known to go on social media every now and then, I just put it out on LinkedIn and said, went out last night and described it. And the response was phenomenal. So I thought, okay, well, let's have a meeting. It's just a get together, nothing formalised. We'll do this session on this day at this time. Come along. I thought we'd get about 20 people. We got 300 in the first session. So there's, then I thought we'd better start taking it a bit more seriously. So I'm not going to do branding. There's no committee or advisory board, nothing like that. It's a collection of people from working class origins who come together and hear from other people who have climbed the ladder. And we've had some phenomenal guests. And I think it's not like traditional CPD, because it's very personal. It's the stories that people respond to, the good and the bad. You hear from the advice. It comes down to most people from working class origin, myself included. There are a few individuals in your life that you just think they were so instrumental to where I am now. I mean, I'm VC, so I can't really say it's held me back. My accent is still the same as it was when I was young, but I've had a few comments and a few bits of classism, but it hasn't exactly held me back. But when you look at class intersectionally, that's where you start seeing, the discrimination and the inequities multiply. Women from working class backgrounds, disabled colleagues, global majority, you can really start seeing that from an intersectional basis. It's the offline conversations as well. People would send me messages and saying, I can't remember hearing another executive who had a Cockney accent. And people talk about how they've felt they had to change their accents because where they were advised to move upwards. The sector is still class-ridden. It's not that talked about, and a lot of people won't admit it, and they will dispute it. I couldn't care less if they dispute it. It's there. Because there are literally hundreds of people who tell me it's there and their experiences. And it was weird at the beginning. I've got these strange messages like people saying, "Oh, this is career limited. Oh, you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't set this up." As though there's this kind of shadowy middle class cabal in HE that are going to jump me in the car park. Do you know? It was silly. It was kind of that, but that's the way class stirs up emotions in the sector. When you talk about class openly, it really does.
You've mentioned social media already, and you are a significant figure on it with tens of thousands of followers, which I imagine is quite a bit more than any other VC in the UK, although I've not checked the stats, if there are any. But flipping that around, I mean, to what extent do you find that social media that you follow to be a source of influence on your own leadership practice?
Yeah, it's immense. I'm not a fan of traditional networking. The idea of going and, the crappy sandwiches and the bad wine you stand around trying to think of something to say, and the advice a lot of young academics, seek out this person, and it's just too artificial. It's always felt too uncomfortable. I never wanted to do it. So social media, I think, is great for that. For all the evils of social media, and some people don't like LinkedIn because it's too superficial. I couldn't care less. There's some really good people. There are people I would have never have connected with in different fields as well. I never read educational books. I couldn't even tell you the last book I read about anything to do with education. I read about the IT sector or AI or marketing is I'm always obsessed with marketing. Customer service, hospitality. These are the people I like to connect with. That's where I get most of my learning from. When I'm in a different category and learning from people who work in a different category, with hospitality, for example, there is so immense learning there. So social media makes that much easier.
And one of the things I've noticed about your posts and also about our conversation today, I mean, you just say it how it is. To what extent do you think that should happen more in higher education?
I think everyone should, but I can get away with it. I'm a straight white man. I can say things that others can't. If you're a woman, if you're global majority, if you're disabled, and you voice some of the things that I do, I mean, I get greeted with silence. I can call out racism in a meeting in a university, and there's silence, there's tumbleweed. Others will get approbation if they do the same thing. And I've had lots of people come up to me and talk. The phrase career limiting gets thrown around a lot because people are fearful in the sector. Now, if you're working in a sector where that many people are fearful of speaking out, there is something fundamentally wrong with this sector. So I do it because I can. I do. Someone said at a meeting the other day, "Oh, you got that working class chip on your shoulder." I probably have, but I believe that I will call things out. But these things need to be said. Too many people, particularly senior leaders, who can get away with this stuff, just prefer to be very bland and tone it down. It's just it doesn't sit right with me. If you have these positions, if you have where you can, do what you can to change the narrative, it's our obligation to speak out.
We talked earlier about your strategic plan, and you mentioned the fact that it would be changing next year to focus on students, staff, and research. Those are the three top things. How do you strike that balance of planning for the medium term? I mean, you said earlier that that's really tough because everything's changing, but there is a sense of direction that needs to be given. But you've also got to respond to the immediate future. How does that balance work?
I've read a lot of leadership books over the years. One of the best, Richard Rumeld, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. And it's with the best book on strategy out there because it cuts through all the rubbish, all the vision statements, the mission statement. Good strategy starts with the problems. It starts with the challenges you're facing. That's all strategy should be. It's not about it. There are too many that are just fantasy. It's this kind of fiction that. And it is another example. So the IFS, for the last few years, every year they ask universities, say, what's your financial plan for the next 5 years? Fiction, absolute fiction. Because most universities are saying, oh, we'll get 20% growth. No one's getting 20% growth. But the universities will continually perpetuate the fiction and this narrative that they are in control of their destinies. No organisation is anymore. None. So you have to prepare the organisation for the next year. So what do we want to achieve in the next year? You have to have a vision, right? Or whatever you want to call it, an aim, a guiding principle. You absolutely have to have that. But after that, it's what you're going to do in the next year. Then if you achieve your goals halfway through, we'll change it in the middle of the year. What's the point in setting 10-year KPIs? If you meet one in year one, it's just going to sit there. You stop doing it. No, you continually improve. So we're doing strategy in a different way. I mean, we do a lot of things differently. It's not for the sake of it. It's because we just don't think it's being done very well in the sector.
And how's your current development going in terms of engaging with staff?
Really well. So we work with an external partner as well who are doing a lot of the stakeholder meetings. We're doing it. Now, here's the other thing. A lot of universities the exec team will go away, write the 40-page strategy, then go out for consultation. It's not consultation because you might get the odd line changing. We haven't written a thing. Not a thing. We've got an idea of where it might go, but it's already looking as though it changed because of the feedback we're getting from staff and students. We're genuinely starting from scratch. We know what the principles that are dear to us. We know what our values are, and we're now shaping it on what our stakeholders, our governors, students, and staff think. So, I mean, there's still a bit where I think sometimes that you can overdo that as a university. Everyone will have a different idea of what an organisation is, what it means, what it should be doing. So you have to be selective. That's the job of leadership. You have to imagine different futures as well, but they have to still be rooted in the reality of the present.
There's a lot of talk in the sector at the moment, isn't there, about collaboration? What are your thoughts on that, whether it's mergers, shared services, or other types of partnership?
Suzanne, I have many thoughts on it. It's a tough time. Organisations at universities are in, varying degrees of distress for various reasons. So, organisations will make the choices they think. Personally, having experienced this in other sectors and different types of organisations and different types of mergers, the amount of years it takes to get to a position where you can operate, that's a lot of wasted years, potentially. There might be really good reasons if it's financial, fair enough. But you still have to think that you're not going to get much else done as an organisation in those, 3 to 5 years, because it always takes longer than you think. It's always more complex and more expensive things to do. So again, you have to take the optimism bias out of these things. If so, but if it's right for universities, go for it. It's not something we're particularly looking at. We're having conversations about how we might collaborate more. But then again, we've always collaborated anyway with that type of university.
Finishing up our conversation today, what are you looking forward to most in the next 12 months?
I think probably letting things settle now. Like you said, there's been an incredible amount of change in an incredibly short period. We restructured from 9 schools to 3 colleges within 3 months. And it was the smoothest transformation I've ever done, because we started with colleagues again. We got their views on it before we pulled the trigger. So letting things settle, I think, and that won't come easy to me because I like innovation, I like change, I like new ideas. Letting innovations bubble up, become emergent, working on the culture, getting the culture right. If there's a student on campus who's lost, new student, we'll know our culture is where it needs to be when there is no one who will walk past that student and not help them. Everyone, regardless of your role, senior, on the ground, professional services, academic, whatever it happens to be, whoever walks past that student will help them and support them until they get to where they've got to go. I've got a literature background, so it's figurative and literal, But that's getting that culture embedded. That's where we want to be.
Damien, it's been really interesting talking to you today. Thank you so much for being my guest.
No, it's been a pleasure. Thanks, Susan.
Job Shadowing HE is proudly supported by the Association of Higher Education Professionals as a valuable source of professional insight. It was presented by Susanna Marsden, and you can find out more about her consultancy work at susannamarsden.co.uk. Audio production and music was by me, Rodri Marsden. Find out more about this podcast and hear previous episodes at jobshadowinghe.com.